Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're glad to have you here. Welcome to today's live broadcast, Integrate, Don't Isolate, the right way to connect RTSM with your trial tech stack. I'm Keely Trull, the Associate Director of Marketing here at Endpoint Clinical, and I'll be moderating today's session. We're excited to bring you this webcast in partnership with Applied Clinical Trials and sponsored by our team here at Endpoint Clinical. Before we dive in, I did just want to briefly introduce Endpoint for those of you who might not know us. Endpoint Clinical is an industry-leading RTSM randomization and trial supply management provider. Our innovative solutions are built on a foundation of more than 15 years of RTSM expertise. Combined with our best-in-class service offerings, we build RTSM solutions that anticipate your needs, proactively solve challenges, streamline operations, and enable your clinical teams to focus where it matters most, on trial success. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin today. First, today's webcast is designed to be interactive, so we encourage you to submit questions at any point using the Q&A box below the video player. You can enlarge the slide window at any time by clicking the small icon in the bottom right corner of the media player. The slides will advance automatically as we go. And as a final FYI, if you experience any technical issues, click the question mark help widget in the top right corner of your screen. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Chris Varner. Chris is the Senior Director of Solutions Consulting here at Endpoint, with over 8 years of experience in clinical project and site management and another 7 years supporting clinical trials through technology. He brings a really well-rounded perspective to trial delivery. As the leader of our solutions consulting team, Chris works hand in hand with sponsors and CROs to develop strategies that align RTSM with each trial's unique needs and complexities. Thanks so much for being with us today, Chris, and I'll let you get started.
Thank you, Keely, and hello, everybody. Wherever you're calling in from, it's great to be here today. So I'll just go ahead and kick off with a little bit of the agenda that we'll be talking through. And where we'll start is with some of the very common challenges of eClinical integrations. Hopefully, we won't hit too close to home, but we all have those experiences, and we'll walk through why it's really important to have a strong solution when you're integrating with an IRT system. And included with that, we'll talk about some real-world impacts and what that can mean to your study. From there, we'll walk into the introduction of an integrations marketplace, which is an innovative approach that we are excited about at Endpoint Clinical, and talk to how it can address some of those challenges and help to mitigate any of those risks in the trial lifecycle. And then we'll give a little bit more detail on how we bring in an integrations marketplace to life. So with that, let's just start at the very beginning and talk about data, which is, of course, one of the key reasons that we would even integrate between two systems. And so we know that, especially as trials are beginning to become more complex and there are increasingly more eClinical vendors out there, that there is data that will be the same between multiple systems. And at the very core of it, if you want to think of one data piece that will be consistent across platforms, it's that subject ID. So being able to link a single identifier for our most important asset, which is our subjects who are on our trials, across the data that is in various respective systems. So there's clearly a giant benefit in being able to have data in multiple systems, but make sure that it is linked correctly. And so one of the first aspects of why we even began integrating with solutions is because we knew we had to have pieces of data that are the same across multiple systems, but it was being done manually. And thinking back on even just the human error that is involved in manipulating an 8-digit alphanumeric subject ID across 2 systems or 3 systems for the same patient through the life of the study, multiply that by, hundreds of potential participants, you quickly understand how you can start to have issue. And so it made a lot of sense to start with a technology solution that could make sure that you enter the data one time or you have the system generate the data and it's consistent wherever it goes throughout the issue. So, or throughout the study. So what we're looking at is trying to make sure that we're not duplicating data. And if we are duplicating data, being very careful about what data is being passed back and forth between systems, and certainly making sure that when that data is duplicative, that it is being done in a way that is not manual, so that you have a strong assurance that there are as few risks as possible when it comes to any data errors. From an integration standpoint, of course, that's relying on data transfers. So building out connections between eClinical platforms and sending data between the two, and ensuring that that is done at the times you expect. It is the data that you expect. And one really key point that I like about the box there with data transfer is the word necessary. And that's making sure that even though you've got an EDC system and an IRT and an eConsent and you're collecting loads of information, that you're only transferring the data that is really applicable to improve your workflow or be used by another system in a meaningful way. And so that's another way, of course, in the design of integrations that we've really focused on decreasing risk as much as possible. What you want in the end, of course, is a series of platforms across your study that each have data integrity, and across all of them are easily able to maintain data accuracy and be consistent, as we'll talk about with some of our upcoming in our upcoming slides about some of the challenges that we can run into. So let's go ahead and just jump right into that in terms of what type of real-world integration issues you may have from a data perspective. It's common sense that you don't want to create a subject in your IRT, also turn around and create them in your EDC system, then again, potentially in your eConsent or eCOA platform and so on, because you're immediately starting to see the divergence of data there and some of the issues that it can present. And so trying to eliminate those process inefficiencies is one of the core reasons for integrating systems, but it's one of the main challenges, that we're working to continue to find improvements on. So we want to make sure that you've got a single subject ID, continuing that example, that is not having to be precisely transcribed into other systems where you're very likely immediately going to see some errors. And then, of course, there are other pieces of data as well that are using particular data points, like a screening data as an example, and making sure that you are inputting that data in the system where it makes the most sense, and then allowing other systems to use that data and be more accurate throughout the process. And screening ID or screening date is a good example there, and other visit dates as well, particularly in IRT perspective, where that when you're completing an IRT transaction, you're expecting a specific action to occur immediately. So if you are randomizing a participant, you're going to then get a dispensation system activity and be able to action that and proceed with your visit. And so you would expect that to be occurring in the IRT system. And then if that date, which is now a part of that record, is needed for making sure that you've got alignment with your EDC system, it's moving in the right direction and headed to the system that it's being used in. And so that leads us directly to data inconsistencies, where what you do not want is misalignment between your IRT and your EDC, to continue that example. So you, again, could have randomization information in both, but they're not automatically synced. And so it can create challenges, especially when you are looking at reporting for your study. So if you want to come in and take a look at a report for the active statuses of your subjects across your study, what you don't want is to come into IRT, run a report on subject status, go into your EDC, run a similar report on subjects that are in that platform, and see discrepancies and inconsistencies between the number of patients you have in screening or screen failed or randomized. And so integrations, of course, are helping to solve that challenge of ensuring real-time alignment of that type of information. And then from a data integrity perspective, I look at this as problems can start really small with, a single error that's occurring, but we know that our studies are running for potentially decades, many, many years most of the time. And those problems and bits of human error, bits of integration failure start to add up over time and lead to significant issues and discrepancies between the audit trails of multiple systems that are, of course, going to have to be rectified prior to the closeout of the study. So integrations help to resolve the issue of asynchronous systems by ensuring that you've got alignment of audit trails from the very beginning of the study. And of course, there will be cleaning efforts that are occurring as you go through the study. But another benefit of the integrations to help with that challenge is as you're going through the process, having a system that's designed to continue that synchronization and exchange of data where it's really necessary in case any updates are made to either platform throughout the life. So that's really the initial focus on data. We know that we know before coming into this presentation that integrations are important, but just to continue to highlight that. But there's also, major challenges when it comes to timelines, especially with the current major, primary approach to integration. So even with the buy-in from a sponsor or study team that integration is really necessary for a study, your current integration timelines could be could come back as unexpectedly lengthy. And that is, not necessarily common with our more common integrations that you're using routinely, like depots and EDCs. But we're seeing a much more a higher volume of integrations around the industry with more complicated systems, and we want to ensure that we're fitting into study timelines. One of the key pieces there that we'll focus on through a number of these challenges listed on the slide are the presence of custom code and code that's required at the study level to enable integrations and support integrations throughout the study. And that's, not only for code or integrations rather that are tried and true and from a library of code, but also with new use cases of integrations that are being built or brand new integrations altogether. So the challenge there is that there's a lot of, again, human input, manual effort that goes into the editing and building and writing of integration code lines that, again, are going to be used specifically at a study level, which does, start to bring in a good amount of risk. So from the initial development perspective, it's critical to have really close collaboration. That's between the sponsor and any vendors that are being used, particularly, of course, between vendors that have systems that are being integrated, so that you're defining requirements, you're building and testing those integrations, and you're optimizing what those requirements and those builds look like for deployment. And ideally, that's happening, well in advance of the timelines for a specific study. But as we know, that's not necessarily the case at all times. So having to build that code by hand and do it at the study level is always going to bring in increased focus and timelines needed. And that's because those, code changes require a very specific skill set. They're adding additional team members from the vendor side to be able to write them and maintain them. And in my head, I see it as kind of like it's increasing the length of a game of telephone. So the sponsors and study teams know exactly the benefits and what they're trying to get out of an integration. If we're designing it on paper, working, of course, with vendors, but going through multiple parties and then transmitting that information to the actual team that's developing and coding, even at the study level, you're starting to have that risk of those decisions and pieces of really important information be misconstrued or misunderstood. So not that it won't be corrected by the time that it goes live, but could impact the overall study timelines as you work your way through because it requires additional time for clarification. Another big piece that I think is, really relevant at the moment is the promotion process, and particularly the promotion process again, where you're using custom code at the study level to build out an integration, and it has to be applied to that study in a manual way. So it's not allowing the system necessarily to simply promote and integrate that integration into your study. And that's a point of frustration for everyone across the board. So you could have had immense collaboration, very carefully tested, very carefully promoted from dev to test and then test to UAT. And then in that UAT to prod promotion, some kind of bug has made itself apparent, which again is a point of frustration across the board for the team members who have put so much hard work into it. And so there is a lot of manual effort that can go into the promotion process that brings risk in, just as there's a lot of manual effort when you're coding by hand that can introduce risk into the integration development process. What we generally do to reduce that risk, of course, is thorough testing, and thorough testing can take a significant amount of time. So, the custom code, the promotion requires extensive validation, both in-house and then when we move on to the UAT process, which must be incorporated into study timelines. And it's just such an important piece that you can't reduce at any moment, especially when you're using unvalidated integrations. And what that requires, again, is continued collaboration by the study teams. And one key factor that I really like to point out here is the transparency and being able to have sponsors see the requirements come to life in the platform prior to a UAT or prior to a testing, so that you don't get to a point where you may be just a couple weeks away from a go live or a study and you see that we haven't quite have the right workflow from an integration standpoint. And of course, if you've gone through an entire process where your integration is being built on code, it's only lengthening the timelines to correct that action, get it tested and promoted into your study. Another factor when it comes to timelines is continued releases. And there's understandably a lot of hesitation around platform upgrades, especially for your study. And when you have integrations that are code-based, you have to take that into a lot of consideration. And generally, I think we take the safe route of not wanting to upgrade the platform version of a study, so that we're not bringing in that level of risk that is, avoided when you approach from, a validated integration perspective. And so in this case, that would be, you've got a study that's working flawlessly, you've got integrations that are exchanging information just as you expect. And then if you were to upgrade your platform version and something in that code that's, study level coding could make its way into a bug, and then again, a process that's been working seamlessly is suddenly not working as expected. And so that, of course, requires you to go back and have a little bit of additional time to determine what that is and resolve. And so there are a lot of things to consider in the way that we approach integrations at the moment. And a lot of it, again, is based in the fact that we've got this coding at the study level that is actually building out the integrations that we're using. So taking a look at some continued kind of real world scenarios that could happen and why they occur. On the left here, we've got one that I think is an extreme scenario based on the outcome as I've defined it here, but something that honestly I bet everyone on the call has experienced at some point. And so when the integrations don't work as planned, it can absolutely be this cascade of challenges that occur. So let's take an example of a single automated trigger that doesn't fire as a result of let's, if we have initiated a site and we're expecting an initial shipment of study drug to go to the site. If that shipment isn't raised, that shipment, of course, will not ship in our second line of the cascade. So our problem is starting to snowball a little bit. And if the site has been told that, hey, when you initiate your first participant or screen your first participant, you'll get a shipment that may be expected to arrive and that it doesn't. The participant could arrive on site and be ready for their visit where they'll be dispense that drug, and the IP isn't there. And so you've got now a mismatch of the location of your IP and your patient who's dedicating their time and they've come to the site. That that visit would have to be rescheduled. You're not only creating delays to your site's timelines and overall study timelines, but obviously that's a major impact from a participant perspective. And it doesn't always mean that you can simply come back and say, hey, well, let's just reschedule for next week when we've got the IP on site. It potentially could lead to that patient not being able to participate in the study anymore, and you have a dropout and someone you haven't been able to bring into the study workflow. So, one seemingly small issue with an integration not firing could potentially snowball into something where you now are looking to have to find another patient for your study. So again, pretty extreme scenario, but one, as you listen to it, may not be too far outside of the realm of possibility, unfortunately. So just something wanted to highlight. Why are these failures occurring? It could be because of code updates that are being pushed out and may have unexpected bugs, introduced errors from that process. It is because of the specialized nature of writing these integrations and being sure to have, not only a team that can read and understand the language that your coding is being based in, but also consistency throughout a study for being able to potentially have someone who has to jump in 2 or 3 years down the line who didn't write the original coding, but has to be as being charged with making an update to it due to a protocol amendment or whatever it may be, and making sure that that's being done in a way that has a lot of quality. And then as well, ongoing maintenance issues. If there are study requirements that are making integrations hard to sustain, that is something where you could initially start to see mismatches between systems as a result of those failures that, of course, you would want to be addressing and rectifying as quickly as possible. And then another area that is very important is real-time monitoring with integrations and ensuring that as you're expecting triggers to fire based on specific actions within one platform and then sending data to another, ensuring that you have the ability to see that, hey, I've completed X number of transactions, and as expected, I have X number of integrations that have been outgoing as a result. And if not, being able to quickly flag and understand why that hasn't occurred. So hopefully I won't take us further down the path of doom and gloom when we talk about some of these challenges and pieces of integrations that we currently are seeing that could have improved solutions. But do want to just take a look as we step back and as we move into what the next step and the value looks like, is what the landscape looks like. And I think a quick word to summarize this web of interactions in a given study is complicated. And we know it's complicated, and we know that that complexity is only rising. And as I look at this, I focus on the connections between the various systems that we may have in a trial and importantly, the roles that are interacting with those systems. And then, of course, the oversight layer that is ensuring that the wheel is turning as smoothly as it can be. And that's where there is a lot of opportunity for improvement. So it's both strengthening the reliance of those connections and continuing to build connections that make sense in study workflow and study trial designs, but also helping to reduce lines where there is unnecessary human interaction where something could be done in a process that's more efficient. So I know, we're continually taking a look, and as mentioned, it will continually get more complex. I think we'll, see additional vendors be added that makes even more need for strong integrations to be a really strong tenet of the work that we do every day. Of course, from an integrations landscape perspective, depots for clinical supply management, EDCs, e-consent, these are integrations that are really commonplace. But we are seeing an increasing amount of more complicated integrations with ECOA, where you have the release of scales throughout the life cycle of a study, lab integrations, direct-to-patient integrations, CTMS, SAP, eSource, forecasting. There's so many beneficial systems across the study lifecycle that, again, we want to ensure are connected where it makes the most sense. And back to a core tenet of our conversation today is that strong relationships, collaborations between vendors is so critical so that those connections between their systems are as strong as possible. So a bit of a recap before we go back, or we start to look forward into some of the latest solutions when it comes to integrations is just looking at the value of a successful integration. So the really positive side of things where everything is working as expected. So we know we're gaining efficiency, we're decreasing the need for manual entry in multiple places and multiple systems across your study. If you are screening somebody in RT, there's no need to complete that transaction in an EDC system, and you have the transaction files and data that's being shared in real time as those actions are being completed. You are ensuring accuracy by reducing and hopefully eliminating excessive reconciliation across systems. Again, we know that there will always be the need for data change corrections, just because if you do have manual data entry, there will be human error that you'll encounter, but we can build integrations that are ready to handle that and make as efficient as possible that process of correcting data throughout all of your systems. So correct it in one place and trust that the accuracy will extend across other systems that you are connected with. Accelerating access is huge, and that's making it so that you are speeding up the information flow between systems. And technology these days, especially with API integrations, is lightning fast, and there are a lot of areas where we can continue to lean on those as we even look at strengthening the volume of API integrations that we can build out, so that information across your systems is in real time and can be trusted regardless of where you're looking. And then, from a cost saving perspective, a lot of this I do certainly link to time, time from a manual data entry perspective, but especially if you look back to our cascading slide of errors, where you start with a single trigger that can lead to a number of mismatches throughout various study systems. Start to multiply that across the volume of participants that you see in studies and sites, and you're starting to look at the end of a study where reconciliation is monumental, especially if you don't have very strong integrations. So trying to reduce as much as possible the need for querying and DCRs when you get to the end of the study, so that those types of errors can be caught in real time because they're being flagged and corrected, and you have that accurate data in your entire suite of eClinical systems. So these values are what we took a look at when we started conceptualizing the API marketplace and the integrations marketplace from our perspective. And the integrations marketplace, as we'll start to look through what that means, is really bringing in ways that can only enhance those values that we just looked at of integrating systems in the first place. So it's improving and further streamlining connections between multiple systems on a single study, and doing so in a really reliant way. It's providing real-time updates and data transfers across all of your information in real time, as not only you're completing the original transactions, but as updates are made throughout the life of the study. So again, if you're looking into reporting, you're seeing consistent information where you would expect it. Improved efficiencies, we're always, I think, from an integration build perspective, one of the goals is, of course, to reduce, find efficiencies when it comes to um, um, workflows from a site perspective and your study perspective, and be as efficient as possible. But this also extends to efficiencies that are impacting things like study timelines, where if you can configure an integration and do it in the same time that you are configuring a lot of the other core information for your study build, and instead of defining requirements and handing it off to somebody who will then code it and bring it back in, you've got efficiencies in your shortening timelines from a study implementation perspective. That also leads directly into scale and reliability. So building integrations in a way that you're building them one time, you're doing so in a way that's validated, and you are configuring them from a study-by-study basis, so that you can rely on that validation and do so time and time again. And that even is related to building integrations between an IRT system and an EDC, as an example, and trusting that you're doing so in a way that it can very easily be replicated across sponsors who may be using those same vendors. Data accuracy, of course, is a key tenet, and is an outcome of a lot of these benefits, including real-time updates, and just a major goal of a lot of this work is ensuring that the errors are minimized, and we have synchronicity between our data in our systems, not only for visibility, but because those data points are being transferred for a reason. They're being integrated for a reason, and likely leading to other outcomes, which can start to build up on that snowball effect if things are if errors are introduced. And then as well, cost reduction, operational cost reduction when it comes to the cost of completing workflows in a study and not doing things multiple times. Cost reductions and timeline reductions from an implementation standpoint because of the ease of setting up integrations, and then cost reduction in the maintenance phase of a study, both in the updates, potential updates to any integration if they need to happen in the life cycle of a study, but also back to the data of ensuring clean data and relying on integrations to make it so you don't have to go back with a massive reconciliation effort at the end of your study to have databases be aligned. So we've certainly internalized all these problems, and these are problems that we've faced hand in hand with our customers and sponsors. And I think about, why did we end up spending so much time and effort to build out this integration marketplace? And it's because the sponsor and site frustrations that integrations can lead to, and start to chip away at hesitancy, or bring in hesitancy and chip away at trust, do the same for us. And we wanted to bring in solutions that are validated and reduce the risk as much as possible throughout the life cycle of a study. And we had a really great opportunity at Endpoint, as we are in our second release of Velocity, our next generation RTSM platform, which we've been in development for a number of years. And it's a platform that's based on a multi-tenant cloud-based architecture that really gave us the opportunity to directly build in a library of API integrations from the ground up. So we can make this process as seamless as possible. So it was one of the very exciting pieces of advanced technology that we're able to be afforded as a result of the development and release of Velocity. So from an approach perspective, we at Endpoint have managed thousands of studies over the past almost 2 decades. So from a system requirements perspective, especially as it comes to integrations, are very fluent, if you will, in terms of not only working very closely with vendors to establish what those requirements look like, but seeing what the integrations play out as and see how they've shifted over time as we've continued to, again, add complexity to the studies and rely on these connections even more. So gave us a great opportunity to include that assessment in the rebuild and the build of our integrations for the marketplace, and with an outcome of being able to connect all of these systems in a way that is really flexible, whether it's through the hundreds of APIs that we have available through SFTP and increased data sharing of visibility and the health of integrations as they move through. The approach is, allowing us to change how we're thinking about the deployment of integrations as well. So I think as we start to look into the configurable aspects of our marketplace, you'll see that really quickly, where, as mentioned in a lot of the challenges, a lot of those risks are introduced by bringing in lines of code, bringing in manual promotion. So those are the challenges that we really focused on in the implementation phase. And so being able to configure and launch integrations through a system-led promotion process is a significant benefit. And then from then on, knowing that this is a life cycle, this isn't just a one and done type of scenario, being able to monitor integrations as they are live on studies, understanding where they're meeting expectations, and of course, being able to very quickly flag when they're not and address. So what does that ecosystem look like when it is starting to be operationalized? And we've got a really exciting flow for an ongoing cycle of building and monitoring. And at Endpoint, this is by a dedicated team. So we have a team that sits outside of our platform development lifecycle that is continuing to identify additional integrations that can be build in the marketplace, and that's either proactively or in collaboration with our sponsors, and then build out those connections, map out what that data flow looks like, integrate with those systems as needed, and then of course test what that validated code and integration looks like. And ideally, these first 5 steps are occurring outside of the life cycle of a study build. And so the first study that would be using an integration is that arrow between 5 and 6, where we've gotten to a point where we have a validated tested integration that then is bringing in that scalability and reliability because it's coming out of the library in a validated state. It's being configured to meet the needs of the study and its specific requirements, and then it's being implemented in that study. And from there, being able to monitor and continue to improve, as mentioned, the integration as it is in operation. So taking a look at some of the offerings from the Velocity API marketplace. All of these are intended to hit some of these benefits of a study. So being quick to implement, being having a low cost of development, low maintenance throughout the life of the study, improved data lineage. And so any updates that are being made in one place are finding their following the entire thread through, whether it's in your system or another system that you're integrating with, and continuing to maintain and provide advanced data flow visibility. So those integrations are, API-based, providing real-time event-driven data transfer, and these are being pre-built, as mentioned in our ecosystem flow, where we're spending the time and building these integrations in a way that the validation is happening before they even touch a study. And so once that validated integration is being brought into a study build, it's being done in a way that's configured and relying on the quality of that study build and or the integration build and the testing that's gone into it reaching that validated state. There also is the possibility for SFTP based integrations if you need data that's being transmitted more in bulk in near real time, and these are being built in a similar way. And so the standard API, the standard SFTP, these are looking at, again, that kind of scalability perspective of we have a relationship with a vendor, we've defined the requirements based on our experience and experience with sponsors in the past, and we want to build up the library with these integrations that can be reused and reused in a way that's expected by the industry. But of course, the marketplace also offers the opportunity for customer-specific integrations. So this is where we'll bring in a specific challenge or a specific need, whether it is an update to or an added specific use case to an integration that's already been built, or an integration to an internal data lake or data warehouse that can be done in a similar method of quality and reliability that once it's done and once it's tested and validated, can be easily reused and configured at the study level moving forward. So it's, again, following those same principles of our development ecosystem and life cycle, and applying those same benefits to each study moving forward once you've developed that customer-specific integration. And then from a data sharing perspective, these are across the multiple offerings that you have, but making sure that you have access to the information that is being transferred. And one key element here, as I link back to our development of Velocity, is that a core tenet of the architecture build for Velocity is our sponsor level data layer, which is giving sponsors unparalleled access, I'd say, to data, whether it's through reporting or through data extracts, and our integration marketplace is linked directly into the extreme control over data that we offer to our sponsors. So thinking back to our web of systems and roles, obviously this is much more simplified. We're a little bit more zoomed in here, specifically on things that are interacting with our RT platform, but it is showing the true simplicity of what this looks like on for an on-the-fly integration setup. So in that validation build, we're defining out for every integration all of the different elements of data from our API library that can be configurable as it makes sense for data transfer for each specific use case. And so that's where, when we bring into the initiation of an integration at the study level in our API marketplace, it is a system-guided step-by-step flow to allow the system designer, and of course in collaboration with the sponsor, to design and confirm exactly what pieces or information are needed at the study level to meet those requirements, and configure it in an interface that we'll see in just a moment, but is super user-friendly. And of course, this is taking a two-way real-time data exchange from any of these pieces of data that's in Velocity into our library of integrations that we've built out across the industry from various eClinical systems. So have a sampling of what that library looks like with some of our partners, and it works in the same way regardless of what integration it is. It's choosing the integration, configuring it on the fly, and then moving into the next steps of your implementation process. So let's dive into what that actually looks like from a Velocity standpoint. So one of the very exciting things that I love about the implementation process here is these integrations, again, being configurable in the marketplace itself, are done so potentially by the same study designer who is collecting requirements and designing and configuring the entirety of the IRT system. with Velocity, we bring a lot of transparency to the table when it comes to the study design process. So the system itself is a user interface in study design that is a step-by-step flow, and the system is guiding the design team through the required elements of information that are needed to be configured and meet the requirements of the study. And then from there, generating out system requirement documentation based on the decisions that have been made. And what that's allowing for is lots more transparency and bringing, the requirements gathering sessions, making them become much more interactive. So if you're taking a look at a visit workflow or a visit schedule, instead of defining that on paper and then again playing the game of telephone and passing that off to a designer and configuring it in the system, it's being done with the screen open, and you can make changes and see them happen in real time. We wanted those same exact principles with the integration marketplace. So you're able to jump right in, see the library from in your study build, understand what's possible, and of course, integrations are generally defined, and what systems you're going to be integrating with prior to getting into that build phase. But once you're selecting that vendor from the library itself, and then the system again is guiding you through the step-by-step workflow, which may require additional information from the vendor side, from the sponsor side as we work through, but it's a clear definition of the validated design of this integration. These elements are required in order to achieve the goal that's being defined for the workflow. So it's a very easy configuration process that you work through and can be seen in real time in collaboration with the study team. And then once that does go live, and of course, with it being a validated integration, reducing the amount of testing that's needed because you're not making those code changes, you're just testing configuration. You're in your live environment and you're able to see and have access to logs for any execution of the integration itself, and see the trail of information and data that has been transferred as applicable. Now, as you work your way through the life cycle of your study, of course, we come to points where we may need to reconfigure or may need to deactivate an integration at some point in the study, likely at the end of the study. These types of elements are, built right into the step-by-step flow design of the integration marketplace itself. So you can see, again, continuing an example of our a integration that we have here with a depot. At any point, you can come in, review the configuration that has been established from an early integration implementation perspective, but also reconfigure, be brought into that step-by-step flow, and really clearly make the changes that are needed either to align with an updated protocol, or any changes in functionality that are needed as a result of the ongoing progression of the study. And then deactivation at the same time is easy to ensure that you either can pause an integration or deactivate it altogether, and ensure that it's not continuing to send data at any point if that's the decision that's made for the study. So as you can see across these 5 examples of how you will interact with Velocity to control the IRT implementation marketplace, it's done in a really thoughtful manner to make it as straightforward and configurable as possible, using those fully validated integrations that are being set up and linked to your studies by configuration only, and then continuing to have the ability to update and monitor the integrations as you work your way through the life cycle of your study. So what I'll do is I'll close us out with a few pieces here where we really do feel like we are revolutionizing integrations with Velocity. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of our webinar today talking about the risks, talking about the challenges, and all of those risks and challenges were at the forefront of our mind when we were building Velocity and building the integration marketplace into that platform. We recognize that there is a lot of challenges and hesitance when you come into a new study, especially when you're building new integrations. And I think it's safe to say that traditional integrations are broken. I don't think we necessarily need to have a eulogy for removing out a bunch of custom code from every single study build at the moment. And so that's where, Velocity is really changing the game. One of my favorite benefits from there is using integrations from the marketplace in that step-by-step flow of configurations. So you can come in and never have interacted with Velocity before and set up an integration, knowing the parameters of data that you want to be connected. And that's, using a robustly built integration that is validated and tested. And then what does that leave? It leaves us with confidence. And I love the phrase confidence in every connection, where that's exactly what you want as you work your way through your study once it goes live. You want to establish your IRT design. You want to establish the integrations that are incorporated with that IRT design, and you never want to think about them again. And that's where there's a lot of confidence in our approach with the integrations marketplace that we are really excited to share with everybody. Great. So I hope you've learned a little bit and hopefully not gone too far into some scary memories from previous challenges with integrations, but see how we're moving things forward as we, continue to share the integrations marketplace in Velocity. So I think, Keely, let's open it up to any questions that we may have.
Let's do it. Thanks so much, Chris, and packed with a lot of good information. So happy to take questions here. Before we did move in, I just wanted a quick reminder for those of you who might have joined us a little bit later. You can submit your questions by typing them into the Q&A box located directly below the video player. If we don't get to your question today, just a heads up, we will have a member of our team reach out to you with an answer, and we'll make sure to follow up on that after the session. So we do have some that have come in throughout the presentation, Chris. So let's start with this one. Can you explain how on-the-fly integration configuration actually works in practice? So someone was paying attention to the slides. We did have on-the-fly there a few times.
I know, and I would love. This is one thing that is really great to see in person as well. And so if we could jump into a demo right now, I absolutely would. But so the integrations on the fly is you're in your study designer for Velocity when you're building out all of the other requirements that are necessary for your study build, and built right into that is the integration marketplace. And so again, you likely are going into the very initial stages of your study build, knowing what integrations you're going to have. And you can enter into the integration marketplace directly from your study build. You have a list of integrations in the library that are organized by, if it's a depot integration or a temperature excursion integration, and the various vendors that we have integrations built with. And it's as easy as selecting one of those. And when you click it, you have an option to configure. And as soon as you click configure, you're brought into that step-by-step workflow where, much like the rest of Velocity when it comes to implementing a study build and configuring a study build, the system is guiding you through a purposeful series of step-by-step questions that are building on top of each other. So it may ask you a specific question that will open up another range of questions. But the intent is you are adding in your elements that are required by the system as defined in that step-by-step flow. And by the end of it, in confirming your selections, the integration is being established through the use of the validated build that's within the library itself. So it is that easy. It is that on the fly enough that you can do it in real time, in conversation and with transparency with a sponsor team on the call.
Great. That's a perfect segue into another question, because I think you covered a good bit of this, but what does that implementation typically look like with the integration marketplace? There's a comment here that, we mentioned it's quick and low maintenance. Is it really as quick and low maintenance as it sounds, as you described it?
Yeah. We did just walk through that. I think the other piece to just add on to what I just described is, the maintenance part of things, where, at any point, say you do have a protocol amendment, say down the road you want to add a new integration. I don't think we necessarily spoke on that, but it's a great way to point out. You can come into your draft of your study build in our development environment, open up the integrations marketplace, and either make a change to an integration, so you update a requirement through that configuration model, or add in an additional integration at some point in the study if that's necessary. So it's super easy to not only set up as described, but continue to maintain and monitor as you go.
Yeah, and I want to be sensitive to time here, so we'll take one more question, but just a reminder, last ditch, get all your questions into the Q&A box and we will follow up with you after the session concludes. So to round us out, how is the API marketplace approach reducing burdens on sites or clinical teams during a trial?
Yeah. A lot of it is just it's working in the background, and it's completing tasks that are making the day-to-day activities more efficient. So, they're with so many clinical systems that are continually being introduced, and again with the increasing complexity in study protocols, site burden is something that the whole industry is rightfully focused on. And I think integrations is an incredible tool to help with a reduction in that site burden. And it's not only for a reduction in it from a transaction perspective, where you are only having to do things one time and you're seeing those actions manifest themselves in actions in other places. So an example being, you say you randomize a participant in your IRT, and that updated status is being sent to an eCOA vendor, and then the eCOA vendor is automatically releasing a COA based on the particular visit, or maybe even just releasing the training for their platform based on the randomization transaction. It's one less thing that a site will have to go through and release, because it's being defined and designed out in a particular order that makes sense and can be monitored over time. And then, of course, the major factor that is, a major piece of the puzzle is the reconciliation of data. A strong integration, of course, will make sure that databases are aligned. You've got the appropriate information that is matching other systems at the same time. So you're not going back and having to update information in multiple places, which is scary even just to say, but also when you are completing DCRs or you are completing data changes and responding to queries, you're also using that integration to efficiently make sure that that data is being transmitted throughout your entire ecosystem of systems.
Great. I think that's a good point for us to wrap up on then, Chris.
Awesome.
So that will bring us to the end of today's event. I did just want to quickly say, if you're interested, in learning more about anything you've heard today, or our next generation RTSM platform, Velocity, which Chris has talked us through on this call today, we'd love to give you a look under the hood. So you can reach out to sales@endpointclinical.com to request a demo, and someone like Chris or someone on his team will be in touch to give you that look at Velocity. So a big thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thanks so much for being a part of the discussion and for the interaction. I'd also like to extend our appreciation to Applied Clinical Trials for hosting today's webcast. Before you go, we would love your feedback, so a short survey will pop up on your screen when the session ends, and we'd really appreciate you just taking a moment to share your thoughts. You'll also receive an email once the replay is available. We really do encourage you to pass it along to any colleagues who couldn't attend today or who maybe didn't know the event was happening. We'd love for you to share it out as you see fit. But thanks again for spending some time with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great one.
Thank you.